Please don't sign that, sir. The little girl's voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. The gold pen stopped less than an inch above the paper. Around the conference table, a dozen executives shifted in their seats. Someone sighed. Someone else laughed under their breath. The child stepped forward anyway and placed a battered cardboard box on polished glass. The box says delivered, she said quietly. But nobody on my street got anything. For a moment, nobody looked at her. Then the chairman looked at the box. 3 hours earlier, the 48th floor of Whitmore Tower smelled faintly of fresh coffee, expensive leather, and a floral perfume that seemed to linger wherever Vanessa Cole walked. Edward Whitmore barely noticed any of it. He sat alone at the head of the boardroom table while the city stretched beyond the windows in sheets of gray morning light. Below him, Manhattan moved with its usual confidence. Above him, a giant screen displayed the title of the presentation that would begin in less than an hour. East Hollow Relief Campaign, 100% delivered. Edward rubbed a hand across his jaw and glanced at the framed photograph near his folder. His late wife smiled back at him from a beach somewhere in Maine, wind blowing through her hair. 12 years had passed since the foundation began carrying her name. 10 years since she was gone. The photograph remained. Some mornings it felt like a comfort. Other mornings it felt like an accusation. A vibration buzzed against the table. His phone lit up with another congratulatory message from a donor. Another successful campaign. Another quarter of positive headlines. Another reminder that everyone believed the foundation was working exactly as intended. Edward silenced the phone. Something about the room felt off. Not wrong, just slightly out of rhythm. His gaze drifted toward a printed report waiting beside the signing folder. Numbers, charts, distribution maps. Every page looked perfect. Too perfect, perhaps. Before he could linger on the thought, the boardroom doors opened. Staff entered carrying tablets and presentation materials. Vanessa arrived last, composed as always. Big day, she said with an easy smile. East Hollow is going to be our strongest success story this year. Edward nodded. That's what the report says. Vanessa's smile never moved. Because it's true. The meeting began. Donors filled seats. Lawyers reviewed final documents. Screens flashed photographs of smiling families holding aid boxes beneath bright autumn skies. Applause followed every statistic. 92,000 meals distributed. Thousands of households served. 100% completion. And then, just as Edward reached for the gold pen that would officially approve the report, a commotion rose outside the room. The doors opened. A security guard stepped inside first, looking embarrassed. Behind him stood a small black girl wearing an oversized coat with frayed cuffs. Dust marked the knees of her jeans. In both hands she carried a cardboard box. The room immediately tightened around her presence. Sir, she refused to leave, the guard said. The girl didn't look at him. She walked straight toward the table. Straight toward Edward. Then she lifted the box and set it in front of him. The cardboard was damp in one corner. A shipping label clung to the side. And stamped across the top in green ink were two words that made Edward's fingers pause above the report. Delivered full. But that wasn't what stopped him. It was the signature underneath. The approval line carried only two words. Vehicle. The room seemed to lose a degree of warmth. No one spoke for a second. Then another. Edward's eyes remained on the signature printed beneath the green stamp. Vehicle. Vanessa's smile did not disappear, but something subtle happened around her eyes. A tightening. A calculation. That's a shipping authorization, she said smoothly before anyone could ask. Hundreds go through my office every month. Around the table, several donors nodded as if that explained everything. Maybe it should have. Yet Edward didn't look away from the box. The cardboard was worn soft along the corners. One edge had been repaired with silver tape. This was not something pulled from a warehouse archive. It had lived somewhere, been carried somewhere. He noticed dirt embedded in the creases. Rain stains along the bottom. A child's fingerprints smudged into old dust. What's your name? He asked. The little girl stood straighter. Maya Brooks. How old are you? 9. Vanessa stepped forward. Mr. Whitmore, with respect, this isn't the time. We can have community relations speak with her afterward. Maya didn't look at Vanessa. She kept her eyes on Edward. My mom already talked to community relations. The room quieted again. 3 times. Edward folded his hands. And what happened? Maya glanced at the empty box. They said there wasn't anything left. A donor near the end of the table shifted uncomfortably. Another checked his phone. The conversation had stopped feeling like an interruption and started feeling like something else. Something nobody wanted attached to their names. Vanessa laughed softly. East Hollow serves thousands of households. Sometimes supplies run out before. Then why does the box say full? Maya asked. Not loudly, not rudely, just plainly. The question landed harder than anger would have. Vanessa opened her mouth, then closed it. Edward noticed. It was only a moment, barely visible, but he noticed. Maya carefully turned the box over. Something rattled inside. A small folded paper slid from beneath a loose flap and landed on the polished table. She picked it up before anyone else could. I found this inside. Edward held out his hand. After a brief hesitation, she gave him the paper. It wasn't a delivery form. It was a warehouse inventory slip. The ink had faded slightly from moisture, yet one line remained clear. Route: East Hollow Distribution Center. Status: completed. Edward read it twice, then a third time. Completed. Across the room, rain tapped softly against the windows. Someone stirred a spoon through coffee. The tiny metallic sound seemed strangely loud. Edward looked down again. The completion date on the slip was October 14th. He flipped through the presentation packet beside him. October 14th. The same date displayed on the Foundation's success report. Everything matched. Too neatly. His phone vibrated against the table. He ignored it. Maya was watching him carefully now. Not hopefully, not fearfully, as if she were waiting to see whether he would notice the same thing she had. Where did you find the box? He asked. Behind the old recreation center. By yourself? She nodded. I collect cans there sometimes. Vanessa crossed her arms. Children find things all the time. That doesn't mean. There were more. Maya's voice cut through hers. The room stilled. Edward looked up. More what? Maya swallowed. More boxes. The rain continued against the glass. Nobody moved. How many? Edward asked quietly. Maya thought for a second. Too many for a place that already got everything. Then she reached into her coat pocket and pulled out something no bigger than a grocery receipt. And this was taped to another one. Edward took it. The paper was torn, damp, nearly unreadable. Nearly, because one line remained untouched by water. Storage Unit B-17. Hold until further instruction. Storage Unit B-17. Hold until further instruction. Edward read the torn strip without changing his expression. But the room had already changed around him. People who had been bored a minute earlier now sat a little straighter. Vanessa's hand moved toward her phone, then stopped halfway when Edward looked up. Where exactly was this taped? He asked. Maya pointed to the side of the box. Under the handle, like somebody didn't want it showing. Vanessa gave a small, polished laugh. Mr. Whitmore, storage labels are normal. Supplies are sometimes held for sorting, quality checks, weather delays. Then why was it behind a locked recreation center? Maya asked. Vanessa's smile thinned. Sweetheart, you may not understand logistics. Maya looked down at the empty box, then back at her. I understand when people say there's nothing left and I can see boxes behind a fence. The words did not sound rehearsed. That made them worse. Edward placed the torn label beside the inventory slip and aligned the two pieces with his fingertips, as if order on the table might restore order in the room. You said your mother came 3 times. Maya nodded. What's her name? Denise Brooks. And when was the last time? Maya's eyes moved upward, remembering. Tuesday, after her night shift. She still had her blue cleaning badge on. Edward's gaze flicked to the report. The East Hollow distribution had supposedly ended the previous Friday. "What time?" he asked. "Around 7:20 in the morning." The laundromat clock across the street was blinking because the power had gone out. A few people exchanged glances. Too specific for a child trying to invent a story. Vanessa folded her arms tighter. "A blinking clock doesn't prove anything." Maya reached carefully into the inside pocket of her coat and pulled out a small hospital parking receipt, wrinkled and soft from being carried too long. "My mom kept this," she said. "She went to the clinic after they turned her away. Her blood sugar got low." Edward took the receipt. St. Agnes Community Clinic. October 18th. 7:46 a.m. The clinic sat 4 blocks from the East Hollow Center. The timing fit. Vanessa leaned forward quickly. "That still doesn't connect to us." Edward did not answer her. He was looking at another detail printed faintly near the bottom of the receipt. Beneath the clinic stamp was a handwritten note from a nurse. "Patient reports no food assistance received. 3rd attempt." The room went still in a different way now, not shocked, but ashamed. Maya's fingers gripped the seam of her coat. "My mom said not to come here," she whispered. "She said powerful people don't like being corrected by children." Edward looked at her then. Really looked. Small shoes damp at the soles. Sleeves too short. Chin lifted anyway. "Why did you come?" he asked. Maya looked at Vanessa for the first time, and Vanessa looked away. "Because the lady at the center told my mom to stop asking before she got removed from the list." Edward's face remained controlled, but his hand stopped moving. "What lady?" Maya swallowed. "The one with the perfume." Vanessa's phone buzzed against her palm. On the locked screen, before she turned it over, Edward saw a message flash from an unknown number. B-17 was supposed to be cleared last night. For a fraction of a second, nobody seemed to breathe. Then Vanessa turned her phone face down so quickly it almost looked accidental. "Excuse me," she said smoothly. "I receive hundreds of messages during major events." Edward said nothing. The boardroom windows reflected a city worth billions of dollars. And for the first time that morning, Maya felt every inch of the distance between her world and theirs. The table alone looked larger than the apartment she shared with her mother. Crystal water glasses sat beside leather folders. Men in tailored suits glanced at her, then at each other. Not openly hostile, just unconvinced. A board member with silver hair adjusted his cufflinks. "Mr. Whitmore," he said carefully, "surely we can agree that one damaged box and a few unfortunate experiences don't invalidate an entire distribution program." Several people nodded. The statement sounded reasonable. Professional. Safe. "Exactly," another added. "We have audits, compliance reviews, digital records. We can't suspend a public report every time someone arrives with a complaint." Complaint. Maya noticed the word immediately. The box on the table had become a complaint. Her mother's empty pantry had become a complaint. Vanessa stepped into the opening. "Perhaps the best solution is to connect Maya's family with our outreach office." She smiled toward the girl. "We'll make sure your mother receives assistance." The room visibly relaxed. There it was. A tidy solution. One family helped. One awkward moment resolved. One report saved. Maya looked down at the box. Her fingers tightened around the crushed edge. "My mom doesn't want special treatment," she said quietly. "She wants the same treatment everybody else was supposed to get." The smile on Vanessa's face remained, but something colder settled underneath it. "Of course," she replied. "And we'll investigate your concerns." Investigate your concerns. Another polished phrase. Another door gently closing. Near the wall, 2 security officers shifted their weight. Not threatening, just waiting, ready if Edward gave the slightest signal. Maya suddenly became aware of her sneakers leaving faint damp marks on the polished floor. A small stain on an expensive surface. A child from East Hollow standing where children from East Hollow did not belong. A woman from legal finally spoke. "Mr. Whitmore, perhaps we should continue the signing and review this matter privately. Afterward." That seems appropriate, said another board member. The Foundation cannot operate based on emotion. Maya stared at the giant screen behind them. Photographs continued cycling automatically. Smiling volunteers, smiling families, smiling children holding boxes identical to the one sitting in front of her. Then she noticed something. Tiny detail. So small nobody else seemed interested. Her eyes narrowed. That's not East Hollow. Nobody answered. Excuse me? Said the attorney. Maya pointed at the screen. That picture. Several heads turned reluctantly. The image showed volunteers unloading supplies beside a community center. Perfect lighting. Perfect smiles. That's not our center, Maya said. Vanessa's voice sharpened almost imperceptibly. Maya, those are campaign photos. No, Maya replied. Our center has red doors. She pointed again. Those doors are blue. The room went quiet. Vanessa laughed softly. Community buildings often look similar. Maya didn't argue. She simply kept staring at the screen. Then she noticed something else. Something even smaller. A white sticker attached to one of the boxes in the photograph. The same sticker she had seen on the storage label. B17. For the first time all morning, Vanessa stopped looking at Maya and looked at the screen. Nobody spoke immediately. The image remained frozen on the giant screen. Blue doors. Smiling volunteers. Boxes stacked neatly for the camera. And there, near the corner of one carton, a white sticker marked B17. The silence stretched just a little too long. Then Vanessa picked up the remote and changed slides. The photograph disappeared. A graph replaced it. Percentages. Delivery metrics. Numbers felt safer than pictures. We're getting distracted, she said. One mislabeled image doesn't change the outcome of the campaign. Edward continued staring at the screen even after the photograph was gone. He wasn't looking at the graph. He was remembering something. 3 months earlier, during a donor dinner, Vanessa had proudly explained that all campaign photography came directly from field teams. No stock images. No substitutions. Authenticity mattered. He remembered because she had repeated the word 3 times. Authenticity. 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 The memory settled uncomfortably beside the blue doors. Maya slowly reached into her coat pocket again. The movement immediately caught Vanessa's attention. What is it now? She asked before she could stop herself. Maya hesitated. I wasn't going to show this. Show what? Edward asked. The girl carefully pulled out an old cell phone. The screen was cracked across one corner. Scratches covered the case. It looked years out of date compared to the devices resting around the conference table. It was my mom's. Maya held it with both hands. I found something before the pictures disappeared. Vanessa's posture changed almost invisibly. Edward noticed. So did one of the attorneys. Maya unlocked the phone. The battery indicator flashed red. 3% remaining. She opened the photo gallery. Empty. Every image folder had been wiped clean. See, Vanessa said quickly. There's nothing there. Maya nodded. That's what I thought too. She tapped another icon. Not photos. Files. Inside was a single folder with no name. The room grew quiet again. Maya looked at Edward. My mom always saves things twice. She opened the folder. Dozens of image files appeared. Time-stamped, organized, untouched. Several donors leaned forward. Vanessa didn't. She sat perfectly still. Maya handed the phone to Edward. He took it carefully. The first photograph showed rows of sealed aid boxes stacked behind a chain-link fence. The second showed the same boxes from another angle. The third included a warehouse door. The fourth stopped him. His thumb froze above the screen. There, parked beside the loading dock, sat a white delivery truck. Ordinary at first glance. Except for the logo. Whitmore Relief Foundation. The foundation's own vehicle. Edward zoomed in slowly. The timestamp sat in the corner. October 18th. 4 days after the report claimed distribution had been completed. Rain tapped softly against the glass outside. Somewhere in the room, a phone vibrated and went unanswered. Edward swiped again. Another photograph. Same truck. Different angle. This time a man stood near the driver's side door. Most of his face was hidden, yet something felt familiar. Not enough to identify. Enough to disturb. Edward lowered the phone slightly. Who deleted the photos? Maya shrugged. I don't know. Then she looked toward Vanessa. But somebody tried. No one challenged her. Edward returned to the images. His gaze lingered on the truck logo, then on the timestamp, then on a small decal near the rear bumper. A fleet identification number. Tiny, easy to miss, but not impossible to trace. He looked up slowly. Across the table, Vanessa finally broke eye contact and reached for her water glass. It was the first time Edward had ever seen her hand shake. The tremor lasted less than a second. Most people in the room never noticed it. Edward did. Vanessa set the glass down carefully and folded her hands together as though nothing had happened. The meeting resumed around them in fragments. Lawyers whispered. Donors exchanged uncertain looks. Someone suggested postponing the signing until questions could be reviewed. Someone else suggested moving the discussion offline. Through it all, Edward said very little. That silence worried Vanessa more than anger would have. 20 minutes later, the boardroom had mostly emptied. Rain streaked the windows in silver lines, blurring the city beyond. Maya sat alone at the far end of the table with the empty box beside her. One of the administrative assistants had quietly brought her a turkey sandwich and a bottle of water. The sandwich remained untouched. Edward noticed. You should eat something, he said. Maya shook her head. Can I take it home? Why? My mom skipped dinner yesterday. Edward looked at the wrapped sandwich. Then at the child. Not once had she asked him for money. Not once had she asked for favors. The realization settled heavily somewhere he preferred not to examine. Of course, he said quietly. Maya nodded and slipped the sandwich into her backpack as carefully as if it were something valuable. Across the room, a television mounted near the reception area played muted financial news. The soft glow flickered against the glass walls. Somewhere beyond the hallway, a spoon tapped gently against a ceramic mug. Ordinary sounds. The kind that made difficult truths feel temporarily far away. Edward reached into his jacket and pulled out his phone. He scrolled to a contact he rarely used. Michael Trent, former federal investigator. Now the Foundation's outside compliance attorney. One of the few people Edward trusted because Michael never cared about being liked. The call lasted less than a minute. I need copies of every warehouse access log connected to East Hollow, Edward said. And I want them before anyone knows I'm looking. He ended the call before explanations became necessary. Maya watched quietly. You think somebody lied? She asked. Edward considered the question. I think somebody wants me to stop asking questions. Maya looked down at the old phone in her lap. Then don't stop. The simplicity of the answer lingered after she said it. An hour later, Michael's first documents arrived. Edward reviewed them alone in a smaller conference room. Access logs, vehicle entries, delivery schedules. Nothing dramatic. Nothing obvious. Exactly the kind of paperwork most people stopped reading after the first page. Which was why Edward kept reading. Rain continued tapping against the windows. Line after line. Badge numbers. Timestamps. Driver IDs. Then one entry made him pause. Fleet Vehicle 14. The same vehicle number visible in Maya's photograph. According to official records, the truck had completed deliveries on October 14th and returned to headquarters by 6:18 p.m. Edward flipped to another page. Security gate records. The truck left again at 11:43 p.m. No return time recorded. He frowned. Missing information happened. Systems failed. People forgot procedures. Yet something about it felt wrong. He opened another file. Then another. Pattern began emerging. Not proof. Not yet. But enough to tighten the air in the room. The final document was a personnel authorization sheet. Edward almost missed it. A simple approval list showing which executives could authorize after-hours warehouse access. He expected to see Vanessa's name. It was there. He expected to see logistics managers. Their names were there too. Then his eyes stopped on one final signature. Someone he had known for over a decade. Someone his late wife had trusted. Someone he had never once questioned. Edward stared at the page for a long moment before slowly lowering it to the table. For the first time, he realized Vanessa might not be the person he had trusted most. She might only be protecting them. Edward did not call another meeting. He did something far more unsettling. He invited everyone back the next morning as if nothing unusual had happened. The email was brief. Routine review of campaign documentation. Attendance requested. By 10 o'clock, the boardroom was full again. Donors, attorneys, department heads. Vanessa arrived 5 minutes early, composed as always. If she was worried, she hid it well. Maya sat quietly near the far end of the table beside the empty cardboard box. She looked smaller than ever beneath the towering glass walls and city skyline. Yet this time nobody asked security to remove her. That alone changed the room. Rain had stopped overnight. Pale sunlight reflected off neighboring skyscrapers and scattered across the polished table. At the center of the room sat a single unopened manila envelope. Edward had placed it there himself. Nobody touched it. Vanessa glanced at it twice. Edward noticed. "Before we begin," he said calmly, "I'd like to clear up a few inconsistencies." His voice remained steady, almost conversational. That made everyone listen more carefully. Vanessa folded her hands. "Of course." Edward slid a document across the table. "You stated yesterday that the campaign photographs were authentic field images. They are. And that no substitute images were used. Correct." Edward nodded once. "Thank you." He did not challenge her. Did not argue. Simply let the answer settle into the room. Maya watched quietly. Then she noticed something. "Can I ask a question?" she said. Several people looked surprised that Edward answered immediately. "Go ahead." Maya pointed toward one of the photographs displayed on the screen. The image with the blue doors. "Why is that tree green?" A few board members frowned. Vanessa blinked. "What?" Maya pointed again. "That tree." Silence. "What about it?" Maya looked down at the inventory slip she still carried folded. In her pocket. "The boxes say October." She looked back up. The trees in East Hollow were orange by then. Nobody spoke. It was such a simple observation that no adult in the room had considered it. Edward slowly turned toward the screen. The tree behind the volunteers was fully green. Summer green. Not autumn. Not October. Not even close. One donor leaned forward. Another adjusted his glasses. Vanessa's smile returned, but slower this time. "Children don't always understand seasonal photography." "Maybe not," Edward said quietly. "But seasons do." A phone vibrated somewhere in the room. No one reached for it. Edward pressed a button on the conference remote. Another image appeared. Then another. Then another. All from the same campaign. Different dates. Different locations. The same green trees. The same blue doors. The same supposedly local volunteers. The room grew colder with every photograph. Vanessa remained perfectly still. Too still. "Interesting coincidence," one attorney murmured. Edward nodded. "That's what I thought." He finally gestured toward the unopened envelope. "Which is why I requested the original metadata files." Nobody moved. Vanessa's eyes locked onto the envelope. For the first time, she looked genuinely uncertain. Edward still did not open it. Instead, he asked one final question. Softly, "Vanessa, if those photographs came from East Hollow, you wouldn't mind us verifying where they were taken?" Her answer came a fraction too slowly. "Of course not." Maya noticed it immediately. The delay. The tiny pause adults always missed. The same pause she had heard at the distribution center. The same pause before people told her mother there was nothing left. Across the table, Edward noticed it too. Neither of them said anything. The silence did the work for them. Then the light on the conference camera mounted near the ceiling blinked from red to green. Recording. Vanessa looked up instinctively. And in that moment, She finally understood something she had not understood yesterday. The little girl was no longer standing alone. The green recording light remained steady above the conference camera. Nobody seemed eager to speak first. The unopened envelope sat in the center of the table like something alive. Edward looked at it for several seconds before finally reaching forward. The sound of paper sliding across polished wood seemed unnaturally loud. Vanessa's eyes followed every movement. So did everyone else's. Edward opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a flash drive and a thin stack of printed reports. Michael Trent had worked quickly. Too quickly, perhaps, which meant he had found more than Edward expected. Edward inserted the drive into the conference system. A loading icon appeared on the screen. Small, harmless, yet no one looked away from it. Maya sat quietly beside the cardboard box. Then she remembered something. Her eyes drifted toward the old phone resting in her lap. "Wait," she said softly. Edward paused. "What is it?" Maya unlocked the phone again. "There was one thing I didn't show yesterday." Vanessa's face changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Maya opened the file folder and scrolled all the way down. Beneath the photographs sat a single audio file, 23 seconds long. She looked at Edward. "I didn't know if it mattered." Edward held out his hand. The room became perfectly still. Maya gave him the phone. The file began to play through the conference speakers. At first there was only wind, then footsteps. The sound quality was poor. Someone moving near a loading dock. Then voices. One male, one female. The male voice spoke first. "These boxes were supposed to be delivered last week." The female voice answered immediately. "Calm. Familiar. They're staying here until further instruction." Edward's jaw tightened. Around the table, people stopped breathing. The male voice hesitated. "The neighborhood keeps asking questions." The woman laughed softly. "They'll stop asking when they get tired." The recording ended. 23 seconds. "No shouting. No confession." Just enough. Vanessa sat motionless. Nobody looked at her because nobody needed to. They recognized the voice. Edward stared at the phone without blinking. Then he turned back toward the screen as Michael's files finally finished loading. The first document appeared. Warehouse inventory records. The second, transportation schedules. The third made the room collapse inward. A transfer ledger. Every missing shipment. Every warehouse hold. Every redirected truck. Every delayed delivery. Connected by dates. Connected by approvals. Connected by signatures. The final page displayed a chain of authorization requests. One name appeared again and again. Vanessa Cole. But that wasn't what made Edward go pale. His eyes dropped lower. Beneath Vanessa's approvals sat another authorization line. The final approval required before supplies could legally be held. Edward Whitmore. His signature. His name. His foundation. His wife's foundation. The room vanished around him. He remembered all the late-night approval packets. All the documents he had signed after 12-hour meetings. All the trust he had placed in people who assured him everything had already been reviewed. The photograph of his wife flashed through his mind. The promise he made beside her hospital bed. Help people. Protect people. Don't let success become more important than service. Yet families had gone hungry beneath his own name. Denise Brooks had stood in line 3 times. Maya had carried an empty box into his boardroom, and he had almost signed another report celebrating it. Edward lowered himself slowly into his chair. For several seconds he could not speak. Across the table, Vanessa finally looked frightened. Not because she had been exposed, because she realized Edward understood his own role in it now. The silence lasted so long that even the city beyond the windows seemed to disappear. Then Edward picked up the cardboard box, looked at it once, set it gently in front of him, and said, very calmly, "Call my attorney." The fallout did not happen in a single dramatic afternoon. It unfolded the way real consequences often do, through meetings, signatures, investigations, and truths that refuse to stay hidden once they reach daylight. Within 48 hours, The board suspended Vanessa Cole pending a full inquiry. Within a week, the inquiry became a formal investigation. Warehouse records, financial transfers, falsified campaign materials, and delayed shipments were traced through a network of approvals that had quietly redirected aid while public reports claimed success. Several senior administrators lost their positions. Contracts were terminated. Outside auditors took control of the foundation's relief operations. Donors demanded answers. Reporters called every day. But the moment Edward remembered most was not in a courtroom or a board meeting. It happened on a cold Thursday morning in East Hollow. He stood beside a delivery truck while volunteers unloaded boxes into a community center with faded red doors. Real red doors. Not the blue ones from the photographs. The line of families stretched down the sidewalk. Parents, grandparents, children bundled in winter coats. Nobody had been invited there for a photo opportunity. Nobody had been told where to stand. Nobody had been asked to smile. They simply came because help had finally arrived. Denise Brooks stood near the entrance holding a clipboard. 3 weeks earlier, she had been struggling to keep up with rent, medical bills, and unpredictable shifts. Now she had accepted a full-time paid position overseeing community distribution for the neighborhood. Not because anyone owed her charity. Because she knew exactly what happened when people stopped listening to the people they claimed to serve. The foundation's legal team had also helped resolve outstanding medical debt connected to her diabetes treatment and secured housing assistance that allowed her family to remain in their apartment without fear of sudden eviction. Quiet protections. Practical protections. The kind that lasted longer than headlines. Maya sat on a folding chair near the entrance with the old phone resting beside her. She watched workers carry boxes through the doors. Every carton opened. Every item counted. Every family recorded. No hidden storage units. No missing trucks. No unexplained. Edward walked over and sat beside her. For a moment neither spoke. The sounds around them filled the silence. Children laughing. Cartons opening. A basketball bouncing somewhere down the block. Life continuing. "You still have it," he said, glancing at the phone. Maya nodded. "It still works." "Barely." She smiled faintly. "Still works." Edward looked down at his hands. For most of his life, people had listened when he spoke. The harder lesson had been learning when he needed to listen instead. "I almost signed that report," he said quietly. Maya looked toward the volunteers carrying supplies into the building. "But you didn't." Edward swallowed. The simplicity of the answer hurt more than blame would have. A few minutes later, workers finished unloading the final pallet. The winter sun slipped through the windows and settled across the community center floor. Someone handed Maya a glass of milk. Full this time, she held it carefully with both hands. Edward noticed the old cardboard box sitting inside a display case near the entrance. The same battered box she had carried into the boardroom. Beneath it sat a small plaque. The box was empty. The truth wasn't. Maya followed his gaze. "Do you know why I kept it?" she asked. Edward shook his head. She looked at the box, then at the families filling the room. "Because everybody believed the paperwork." Her voice remained soft. Nobody believed the box. Edward could not think of anything to say. He simply sat there while the sounds of the community center continued around them, and for the first time in a very long time, the most powerful person in the room was listening to the smallest one.